The world knows Leonardo da Vinci as a genius, a painter, an inventor, a man who seemed to understand the universe before the rest of humanity even knew the questions. But that version of Leonardo is incomplete. Because behind the legend, there was a mind that never rested, never settled, and never truly belonged anywhere. And that is where the story begins, not with greatness, but with distance. Leonardo was born in 1452, near the quiet countryside of Florence, during a time when art was power and knowledge was currency. But he entered the world as an outsider, an illegitimate child in a society obsessed with status and legitimacy. He was close enough to see greatness, but never close enough to fully claim it. And that gap changes a person. It creates a silent observer, someone who watches instead of participates, someone who studies instead of simply living. While others chased acceptance, Leonardo studied human behavior like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. He watched how people smiled, even when they lied. He watched how power moved, even when no one spoke about it. And slowly, without anyone noticing, he began to detach. Because when you observe too much, you stop feeling like part of the system. You begin to see patterns. You begin to see through people. And once you see through everything, it becomes very hard to believe in anything. That was Leonardo's first transformation, not into a genius, but into something far more dangerous, a mind that questions everything. As he grew older, his talent became undeniable. He entered the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the most respected artists of the time, and quickly proved that he wasn't just another student. He was different, faster, deeper, more obsessive. While others painted what they saw, Leonardo painted what he understood, and understanding became his addiction.
He wasn't satisfied with surface beauty. He wanted to know what was beneath it. He studied anatomy, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. If he was going to paint the human body, he needed to understand how it worked: muscle, bone, tension, movement. So he did something most would never dare to do. He began dissecting human corpses in secret. In a world where the human body was considered sacred, Leonardo treated it like a machine waiting to be decoded. He cut through flesh, not with cruelty, but with precision, searching for answers that religion and tradition refused to give. And in doing so, he crossed a line between artist and something else, something colder, something more calculated. Because when you reduce the human body to parts, to systems, to mechanics, it changes how you see people. They are no longer mysterious beings filled with emotion. They become structures, predictable, understandable, controllable. And that shift in perception is subtle, but irreversible. Leonardo didn't just study a body. He studied motion, water, light, even the sky. His notebooks filled with sketches that looked less like ideas and more like fragments of a future no one else could see. Flying machines, war devices, mechanical systems that would not exist for centuries. He was not living in his time. He was trapped ahead of it. And that isolation grew heavier with every passing year. Because imagine knowing things no one else understands, seeing possibilities no one else can imagine, and realizing that the world around you is simply too slow, too limited, too blind. That kind of awareness doesn't bring peace. It creates frustration. And frustration, when left unchecked, becomes obsession. Leonardo became obsessed with perfection. Not the kind of perfection that impresses others, but the kind that satisfies an internal standard that can never truly be reached. Every painting, every design, every idea had to be flawless. And because nothing is ever truly flawless, he began to leave things unfinished. Projects abandoned, paintings delayed, ideas left incomplete. Not because he lacked discipline, but because his mind refused to accept anything less than total understanding. And total understanding is impossible. That was his paradox. The more he learned, the more he realized how much he didn't know. And instead of simplifying his vision, he expanded it, chasing deeper truths, more complex systems, more impossible ideas. He wasn't building a career, he was chasing something far beyond it. And that chase had no end. Because Leonardo da Vinci was not just trying to create art, he was trying to decode existence itself. And that is where everything begins to break.
Genius is not always gentle. Sometimes it is calculated. And in the case of Leonardo da Vinci, it became something far more unsettling than the world is willing to admit. Because behind the soft smile of the Mona Lisa, behind the divine stillness of the Last Supper, there was a mind that understood one brutal truth. Power belongs to those who can shape reality, not just observe it. Leonardo understood this early, and that understanding led him into the courts of powerful rulers, including Ludovico Sforza of Milan. But he did not present himself as just an artist. That would have been too simple, too limited. Instead, he offered something far more valuable: control. In a letter that still echoes through history, Leonardo listed his abilities not as an artist, but as a military engineer. He spoke of weapons, war machines, siege devices, systems designed not to create beauty, but to destroy it. This was not an accident, it was a decision. Because Leonardo knew that in a world ruled by conflict, the fastest way to power was not through art, but through war. And if he wanted access to resources, influence, and freedom to explore his ideas, he needed to make himself indispensable, even if it meant building tools of destruction. And so the man who would become one of history's greatest artists began designing machines of war, armored vehicles that resembled early tanks, massive crossbows capable of devastating enemy lines, defensive systems meant to dominate entire battlefields. Ideas far ahead of their time, ideas that could have changed the nature of warfare. But here is where the contradiction begins to deepen, because Leonardo was not a soldier.
He did not fight on the battlefield. He did not experience the chaos, the screams, the blood that his machines were meant to create. He observed from a distance, designing systems as if they were puzzles to be solved, detached from the consequences they might bring. And that distance is dangerous, because when you are removed from the impact of your own creations, morality becomes abstract, war becomes theory, destruction becomes design. And Leonardo was a master designer. At the same time, his artistic work continued to evolve, but even that was not free from control. His paintings were not just expressions of beauty, they were psychological constructs carefully engineered to guide the viewer's perception. The smile of the Mona Lisa is not random. It is calculated. A balance of shadow, proportion, and subtle asymmetry that forces the human brain into uncertainty. You think she is smiling, and then you are not sure. And that uncertainty keeps you looking, keeps you thinking, keeps you trapped. Leonardo understood the human mind at a level few ever have. He knew how to manipulate perception, how to create emotion,
how to control attention without the viewer even realizing it. His art was not passive. It was active. It worked on you. And that is a form of power. But power always comes with isolation. The more Leonardo understood, the further he drifted from those around him. His mind operated at a different speed, a different depth, a different reality. Conversations became shallow, connections became temporary, people became predictable. And when everything becomes predictable, it loses meaning. So Leonardo turned inward, deeper into his studies, deeper into his notebooks, deeper into ideas that no one else could follow. He filled pages with mirrored writing, sketches, theories, observations that seemed almost alien in their complexity. Some believe it was to protect his ideas. Others believe it was simply how his mind worked. But there is another possibility, that he was no longer trying to be understood, because understanding requires limitation, and Leonardo refused to be limited. He became something else entirely, not just an artist, not just an inventor, but a mind operating beyond the boundaries of his time. And that kind of mind does not fit neatly into society. It exists on the edge of it, looking in, analyzing, designing, controlling, but never fully belonging. And that is the cost of absolute awareness. Because when you see the world clearly, you also see how fragile it is, how easy it would be to change it or break it. And Leonardo da Vinci knew both were possible.
In the end, even a mind like Leonardo da Vinci could not escape one thing: time. For all his brilliance, all his visions, all the futures he carried inside his head, Leonardo was still human. And being human means living within limits, limits of the body, limits of society, limits of a world that cannot move as fast as your thoughts. And that is where the cost begins to show. Because Leonardo did not fail in the way most people fail. He failed quietly. Not through collapse, but through incompletion. Many of his greatest ideas were never fully realized. His notebooks were filled with designs that could have changed the world: flying machines, mechanical systems, anatomical discoveries. But most of them remained on paper, trapped between imagination and reality. Not because they were impossible, but because the world was not ready. And that creates a strange kind of tragedy. Imagine seeing the future clearly, but being forced to live in a present that cannot understand it. Imagine knowing answers, but having no one capable of asking the right questions. That is not power. That is isolation. As Leonardo grew older, his pace slowed, but his mind did not. If anything, it became even more restless, more obsessed, more unwilling to settle for simple explanations. He moved between courts, between cities, between roles, artist, engineer, thinker, but never truly anchored himself in one identity. Because he was all of them, and none of them. That contradiction followed him everywhere. To some, he was a genius. To others, unreliable.
A man who started too many things and finished too few. A mind too vast to be contained by expectation. But here is the deeper truth. Leonardo was not trying to meet expectations. He was trying to transcend them. And that is a dangerous path. Because when you chase something beyond human limits, you begin to lose connection with what it means to be human in the first place. Relationships fade. Stability disappears. Life becomes less about living and more about searching. Always searching. For truth, for understanding, for something just out of reach. And that search never ends. When Leonardo finally reached the final years of his life, he carried with him not just achievements, but fragments, unfinished works, incomplete theories, ideas waiting for a future that would come long after he was gone. He had touched greatness, yes, but he had also touched something else, something heavier. The realization that no matter how much you know, there will always be more. And that realization can break a person, or define them. After his death, the world slowly began to uncover what he had left behind. His paintings became priceless. His ideas became foundations. His name became synonymous with genius. The Mona Lisa would become the most famous painting in history. But the man behind it, still a mystery, still incomplete. Because history doesn't preserve minds, it preserves results. And Leonardo's mind was far greater than anything he could fully complete in one lifetime. So the question remains, was Leonardo da Vinci a visionary who pushed humanity forward, or a man consumed by an endless obsession, chasing knowledge that no human was ever meant to fully understand? The answer is uncomfortable, because it is both. He was a creator and a prisoner of his own mind. A man who saw too much and could never look away. And that is the true cost of ambition at its highest level. It gives you everything and takes something you can never get back.